The cold bit through Michael Vance's coat like 1,000 tiny knives as he huddled closer to the fire, watching the flames dance against the endless Wyoming darkness that stretched across the frozen plains near Malad City, Idaho, where he had been traveling through on his way to Montana in the harsh winter of 1878. He had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing his horse harder than he should have, trying to reach the next town before the worst of the winter storm hit. But nature had other plans, and he found himself making camp in a small grove of trees that offered minimal protection from the howling wind. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the black sky above, and Michael pulled his hat down lower over his eyes, trying to conserve what little warmth he could muster. That was when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it over the wind. A soft whimper, like an injured animal might make. Michael's hand instinctively went to his rifle, but something stopped him from grabbing it. The sound came again, and this time he could tell it was human. Someone was out there in the darkness, and by the sound of it, they were in trouble. Michael stood up, grabbing a burning branch from the fire to use as a torch, and walked toward the sound. His boots crunched in the snow as he moved away from the warmth of his camp, and within moments, he spotted a figure slumped against a rock formation about 20 yards away. As he got closer, he could see it was a woman, and she was shaking violently from the cold. She wore traditional tribal clothing, though it was soaked through and offered no protection against the brutal temperature. Her long black hair was matted with ice, and her lips had taken on a bluish tint that Michael recognized as the early stages of severe hypothermia. She looked up at him with dark eyes that held both fear and desperate hope. "Please," she managed to whisper through chattering teeth. "Help." Michael did not hesitate. He dropped the torch and scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how light she felt. She could not have been out here long, or she would already be dead. He carried her back to his fire and immediately began working to save her life. He had seen men die from exposure before, and he knew she did not have much time. He laid her down close to the fire and quickly removed her wet clothing, replacing it with his spare blanket and his own coat. Modesty was a luxury neither of them could afford right now. He built up the fire higher, adding more wood until it blazed bright and hot. Then he began rubbing her hands and feet, trying to get the circulation going again. The woman's eyes fluttered closed, and Michael gently shook her. "Stay awake. You have to stay awake. What is your name?" "R.R. Raven," she stammered, her teeth still chattering violently. "Raven. That is a beautiful name. I am Michael. Michael Vance. You are going to be all right, Raven. I promise you that, but you need to stay awake for me. Can you do that?" She nodded weakly, and Michael continued his work, alternating between warming her extremities and adding wood to the fire. He heated water in his tin cup and helped her drink small sips, knowing she needed to warm up from the inside as well. Slowly, gradually, color began to return to her face and her shaking became less violent. "What happened?" Michael asked softly as he continued to tend to her. "How did you end up out here alone in the middle of a winter storm?" Raven's voice was still weak, but she managed to speak. "I was with my people. We were moving to winter camp. I wandered away from the group to gather wood for the fires. The storm came so fast, I could not find my way back. I walked and walked, but everything looked the same. I thought I was going to die." Michael felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the circumstances that had led her here. He knew the local tribes had been pushed farther and farther from their traditional lands, forced to move constantly to avoid conflicts with settlers and the military. The fact that she had been separated during such a dangerous time spoke to the chaos her people must be facing. "You are safe now," he told her firmly. "I will not let anything happen to you." Raven looked at him with those dark eyes, and for the first time, Michael saw something other than fear in them. There was gratitude, yes, but also curiosity. She was studying him, trying to figure out what kind of man he was. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why do you help me?" "Many of your kind would not." Michael was silent for a moment, considering his answer. It was true that tensions between white settlers and native tribes were high throughout the territory. He had seen terrible things done on both sides, acts of violence and cruelty that haunted him still. But he had never believed in judging people based on the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because every life is valuable, no matter who they are or where they come from. My mother raised me to believe that we are all human beings first, everything else second." Raven studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your mother was a wise woman." "She was," Michael agreed, feeling the familiar pang of loss that always came when he thought of her. She had died 5 years ago, taken by fever, and he still missed her every single day. "She would have liked you, I think." They fell into a comfortable silence after that, with Michael continuing to tend the fire and Raven slowly recovering her strength. As the hours passed and the night deepened, they began to talk more freely. Raven told him about her people, the challenges they faced trying to maintain their way of life in an increasingly hostile world. She spoke of her childhood, of learning traditional crafts and stories from the elders, of the beauty of the land before so much of it had been taken away. Michael found himself captivated by her words, by the passion and intelligence that shone through despite her weakened state. He told her about his own life, about growing up on a small ranch in Wyoming, about losing his parents and striking out on his own to make his way in the world. He spoke of his dreams of finding a place where he could settle down, maybe start his own ranch, build something that would last. As dawn began to break on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Michael realized with some surprise that he had talked more with this woman in one night than he had with anyone in months. There was something about her that put him at ease, that made him want to share parts of himself he usually kept hidden. Raven had recovered significantly by this point. The color had returned to her face, and though she was still tired, the immediate danger had passed. She sat wrapped in Michael's blanket and coat, watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder. "I did not think I would see another morning," she said softly. "Thank you, Michael Vance. You saved my life." "I am just glad I was here," Michael replied, meaning it more than he could express. Something had shifted inside him during the long night, something he could not quite put into words yet. All he knew was that the thought of this woman dying alone in the cold filled him with a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. They were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Many horses. Michael stood up quickly, his hand going to his rifle, and Raven's eyes widened with recognition. "My people," she said, struggling to stand. "They must have tracked me through the night." Within moments, a group of riders appeared through the trees. There were at least 20 of them, all mounted on strong horses and armed with rifles and bows. At the front rode a man who was clearly their leader. He was tall and powerfully built, with long black hair streaked with gray and a face that showed both wisdom and strength. He wore traditional clothing adorned with intricate beadwork, and he carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. His eyes locked onto Michael immediately, and his expression darkened. He barked something in his native language, and several of the riders moved to flank Michael's position, cutting off any escape route. Michael kept his hand near his rifle but did not draw it. He understood he was vastly outnumbered, and more importantly, he had no desire to fight these people. Raven stepped forward, calling out in her own language. The leader's attention snapped to her, and his stern expression softened momentarily with relief. He dismounted and strode toward her, speaking rapidly. Raven responded in kind, gesturing toward Michael several times during her explanation. Michael stood still, waiting, his heart pounding but his face calm. He had been in dangerous situations before, and he knew that showing fear would only make things worse. Whatever happened next was out of his hands. After what felt like an eternity, the leader turned his full attention to Michael. He studied him for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to look straight into Michael's soul. When he finally spoke, it was in accented but clear English. "I am Chief Red Eagle of the Shoshone people. This woman is Raven James, daughter of my sister, and precious to me as if she were my own child. She tells me you found her dying in the cold and shared your fire, that you saved her life when you could have left her to her fate." Michael nodded slowly. "That is true, Chief. I could not leave her to die. It would not have been right." Red Eagle's expression remained unreadable. "Many of your people would have done exactly that. Many have done worse. My people have suffered greatly at the hands of white men who see us as less than human, as obstacles to be removed. Why should I believe you are different? I suppose you should not," Michael said honestly. "You do not know me. All you have is my word, and I understand that may mean nothing to you, but I swear to you I meant your niece no harm. I only wanted to help her." Red Eagle was silent for a long moment, and tension hung thick in the air. The other riders had their hands on their weapons, ready to act on their chief's command. Raven said something else in Shoshone, her voice urgent, but Red Eagle held up a hand to silence her. "Words are easy," the chief said finally. "Any man can speak them. But the measure of a man is shown through his actions, through his willingness to back up his words with deeds. You say you meant my niece no harm, that you are different from other white men. I will give you the opportunity to prove this." Michael felt his stomach tighten. "What do you have in mind?" Red Eagle's expression was stern. "A challenge. If you truly respect my people and our ways, you will accept. If you refuse, then I will know your words are empty and you will leave this place immediately, never to come near our lands again." Michael glanced at Raven, who was watching him with an expression of worry and something else he could not quite identify. He looked back at Red Eagle. "What kind of challenge?" "You will come with us to our winter camp," Red Eagle said. "You will spend 1 month living among my people, learning our ways, proving that you can respect our customs and traditions. During this time, you will work alongside our men, hunt with them, share in the hardships and joys of our daily life. At the end of the month, if you have conducted yourself with honor and respect, you will be welcomed as a friend of the Shoshone. If you fail, or if you dishonor yourself or my people in any way, you will be cast out and marked as an enemy." Michael felt the weight of every eye upon him. This was not what he had expected when he woke up this morning. He had plans, places he needed to be. Montana was waiting, and the job he had lined up there would not wait forever. But as he looked at Raven, at the hope and fear mingled in her dark eyes, he found his decision was already made. "I accept your challenge, Chief Red Eagle," he said clearly. "I will prove to you and your people that I am a man of honor." A murmur ran through the assembled riders, and Red Eagle's expression shifted slightly. Michael thought he saw a glimmer of respect in the older man's eyes, though it was gone so quickly he could not be sure. "Very well," Red Eagle said. "Gather your belongings. We leave immediately. Your horse will be well cared for and your possessions will be kept safe. No harm will come to you unless you bring it upon yourself. This I swear before the spirits of my ancestors." Michael nodded and began breaking down his camp, acutely aware of the many eyes watching his every move. Raven approached him as he worked, moving slowly, still recovering from her ordeal. "You did not have to accept," she said softly. "My uncle would have let you go. He is stern, but he is fair. He knows you saved my life." Michael paused in his packing and looked at her. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly than he had been able to in the darkness. She was beautiful, with high cheekbones and smooth brown skin, her dark hair falling past her shoulders despite its disheveled state. But it was her eyes that caught him most, intelligent and deep, holding mysteries he wanted to understand. "I wanted to accept," he said truthfully. "I have spent so much of my life moving from place to place, never really connecting with anyone or anything. Maybe it is time I learned something new, experienced a different way of living. And besides," he added with a small smile, "I need to make sure you fully recover from last night. I did not work that hard to save you just to wonder if you are all right." Raven's expression softened, and she reached out to touch his arm briefly. "Thank you, Michael Vance. I will not forget what you have done for me." Before Michael could respond, Red Eagle called out something in Shoshone, and Raven quickly moved back to the other riders. Michael finished gathering his belongings, loaded everything onto his horse, and mounted up. The group set off immediately, with Michael riding in the middle of the group, surrounded on all sides. They traveled for several hours through increasingly rugged terrain, following paths that Michael would never have been able to find on his own. The winter landscape was harsh but beautiful, with snow-covered peaks rising in the distance and frozen streams cutting through valleys. The Shoshone riders moved with practiced ease, clearly at home in this environment in a way Michael could only admire. By mid-afternoon, they arrived at the winter camp. It was situated in a protected valley, with the lodges arranged in a large circle. Smoke rose from the tops of the structures, and Michael could see people moving about, going about their daily tasks. As the riders entered the camp, people stopped what they were doing to watch, curiosity and wariness evident on their faces. Red Eagle led the group to the center of the camp and dismounted. He called out in Shoshone, and people began to gather around. Michael dismounted as well, feeling very conscious of being the center of attention. Red Eagle spoke at length to the assembled crowd, and though Michael could not understand the words, he caught his own name several times as well as Raven's. When the chief finished speaking, there was a moment of silence, then a buzz of conversation broke out. Some people looked at Michael with open hostility, while others seemed merely curious. An older woman approached Raven and embraced her tightly, speaking rapidly and touching her face and hands as if to verify she was truly unharmed. Red Eagle turned to Michael. "That is White Dove, Raven's mother and my sister. She thanks you for saving her daughter's life, though she is also angry that Raven was foolish enough to wander away from the group in the first place." Michael nodded respectfully toward White Dove, who studied him with the same intensity her brother had shown. She said something to Red Eagle, who nodded and replied, "You will stay in the lodge of Strong Bear, one of our finest warriors," Red Eagle told Michael. "He has agreed to be your guide during your time with us. He will teach you our ways and help you understand our customs. Listen to him carefully and treat him with respect. He is doing you a great honor by taking on this responsibility." A man stepped forward from the crowd. He was younger than Red Eagle, probably in his early 30s, with a powerful build and a serious expression. He looked Michael up and down, then nodded once. "Come," Strong Bear said in English. "I will show you where you will sleep." Michael followed him through the camp, very aware of the eyes tracking his every movement. Strong Bear's lodge was on the eastern edge of the circle, and inside it was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Furs and blankets covered the ground, and a small fire burned in the center, the smoke rising through a hole in the top of the structure. A woman was inside, working on some beadwork with two small children playing nearby. She looked up as they entered, and Strong Bear spoke to her in Shoshone. She nodded and smiled at Michael, though he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "This is my wife, Morning Song, and my children, Swift Fox and Little Bird," Strong Bear said. "They will treat you as a guest while you are here." "Thank you," Michael said, nodding to each of them in turn. "I am honored to share your home." Strong Bear grunted, which Michael took as acknowledgement if not quite approval. "Put your things there," he said, pointing to a spot along the edge of the lodge. "We will eat soon, and then I will show you the camp. Tomorrow the real work begins." "Chief Red Eagle has given you a difficult challenge, white man. Many here do not believe you will succeed. They think you will run back to your own kind before the first week is done." Michael met his gaze steadily. "I will prove them wrong." "We will see," Strong Bear said, but there was a hint of something in his expression that might have been approval. "We will see." The days that followed were among the most challenging of Michael's life, but also among the most rewarding. He rose before dawn each morning and worked until long after dark, learning the skills and knowledge that the Shoshone people had accumulated over generations. Strong Bear proved to be a patient if demanding teacher, showing Michael how to track game in winter conditions, how to preserve meat and hides, how to navigate by the stars and read the signs of changing weather. Michael also learned that life in the winter camp was far from easy. The Shoshone people faced constant challenges, from the harsh weather to the scarcity of game to the ever-present threat of conflict with soldiers and settlers. They lived in a state of precarious balance, maintaining their traditional ways while adapting to a world that was changing rapidly around them. But despite the hardships, Michael also witnessed joy and community that he had rarely seen in white settlements. Families gathered together in the evenings to share stories and songs. Children played games in the snow, their laughter ringing through the camp. The elders were treated with deep respect, their wisdom sought and valued. There was a sense of connection here, of people truly caring for one another, that moved Michael more than he had expected. And through it all, he found himself drawn more and more to Raven. She had recovered fully from her ordeal and resumed her place in the community. He saw her often throughout the days, working alongside the other women, and he found reasons to be near her, to talk with her, to learn from her about the Shoshone way of life. Raven, whose full name he learned was Raven James, had been given her last name by a missionary when she was young, though she rarely used it. She was 22 years old, unmarried and devoted to her people. Her father had died in a conflict with soldiers when she was 15, and her mother had never remarried. She had been trained in traditional women's work, but also had learned to hunt and track from her uncle, who had no sons of his own. Michael was 25, and as they spent more time together, he found himself fascinated by her intelligence and strength. She had a quick wit and a talent for languages, speaking not only Shoshone but also English and some French, learned from traders who had passed through the area. She asked him countless questions about his world, and he found himself sharing stories and thoughts he had never spoken aloud before. One evening, about 2 weeks into his stay, Michael was sitting outside Strong Bear's lodge, working on repairing a leather harness. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, and most of the camp was preparing for the evening meal. Raven approached, carrying a basket of supplies. "May I sit with you?" she asked. Michael looked up and smiled. "Of course. I would welcome the company." She settled down beside him, setting the basket aside, and watched him work for a moment. "You are learning quickly," she observed. "Strong Bear says you have a natural aptitude for our ways. That is high praise from him. He does not give compliments easily." "He is a good teacher," Michael said, focusing on the leather in his hands. "And I am motivated to learn. I want to prove to your uncle and to all your people that I am sincere in my respect for you." "I think you have already done that," Raven said softly. "Most people here see how hard you work, how willing you are to learn. Even those who were most skeptical at first are starting to change their minds." Michael felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "What about you?" he asked, meeting her eyes. "What do you think?" Raven was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "I think you are a good man, Michael Vance. I think you have a kind heart and a strong spirit. I think the Great Spirit guided you to find me that night for a reason." The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken words, with feelings that were growing stronger each day, but that neither of them had yet dared to name. Michael wanted to reach out and take her hand, to tell her that he had not stopped thinking about her since that first night, that she had awakened something in him he had thought long dead. But he held back, aware of the scrutiny they were under, aware that any misstep could ruin everything he had worked for. "I am glad I found you," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I cannot imagine what my life would be like now if I had not heard you that night." Raven smiled, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and more carefree. "Nor can I," she admitted. "You gave me a second chance at life, Michael. That is not a debt that can ever be repaid." "I do not want repayment," Michael said firmly. "I want," he paused, searching for the right words. "I want to know you better, Raven. I want to understand your world, your dreams, everything that makes you who you are." Before Raven could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the center of camp. Voices were raised in alarm, and people were running toward the source of the disturbance. Michael and Raven both stood up quickly, exchanging worried glances before hurrying to see what was happening. They found a group of riders who had just arrived, their horses lathered with sweat despite the cold. The lead rider was speaking urgently to Red Eagle, gesturing wildly. Michael could not understand the words, but the tension in the air was palpable. Strong Bear appeared at Michael's side. "Trouble," he said grimly. "A group of soldiers from Fort Hall are heading this way. They are looking for Shoshone to force back onto the reservation. We will have to move the camp immediately." Michael felt his stomach drop. "How long do we have?" "They are 2 days behind, maybe 3 if we are lucky," Strong Bear replied. "We will leave at first light tomorrow. It will be a hard journey in the winter, but we have no choice." The camp erupted into organized chaos as people began preparing for the sudden move. Michael found himself swept up in the activity, helping to take down lodges, pack supplies, and prepare the horses. He worked through the night alongside everyone else, and when dawn finally broke, the camp was ready to move. The journey that followed was brutal. They traveled through snow and wind, following paths that seemed to exist more in the minds of the Shoshone than in any physical reality. Children cried from the cold, and the elderly struggled with the pace, but everyone pushed forward because there was no other choice. Michael rode near the rear of the group, helping to herd the spare horses and watching for any signs of pursuit. He could see the strain on everyone's faces, the fear and anger at being forced to flee yet again from their traditional lands. It filled him with a helpless rage at the injustice of it all, at a system that treated these proud people as less than human. On the 3rd day of the journey, as they were crossing a frozen river, disaster struck. One of the children, a boy of about 8, broke through the ice. His mother screamed and several men rushed forward, but the current was strong, and the boy was already being swept away. Michael did not think. He spurred his horse forward, riding along the bank until he was ahead of the struggling child. Then he dismounted and ran out onto the ice. He could hear people shouting behind him, warning him back, but he ignored them. The ice cracked ominously under his weight, but he kept moving, reaching the hole where the boy had gone through just as the child's head broke the surface again. Michael dropped to his stomach, distributing his weight, and reached out. His hand closed around the boy's arm, and he pulled with all his strength. The boy came up out of the water, gasping and choking, and Michael dragged him back across the ice toward the shore. The ice cracked and groaned, and for a moment Michael thought they were both going to go through. But then hands were reaching for them, pulling them to safety. Strong Bear and several other men hauled both Michael and the boy back onto solid ground. The child was immediately wrapped in blankets and carried to one of the traveling lodges, and someone threw a blanket around Michael's shoulders. He was soaking wet and already starting to feel the cold seeping into his bones. Red Eagle appeared, his expression intense. "You risked your life for Little Hawk," he said. "You did not have to do that." Michael's teeth were starting to chatter, but he managed to speak. "Yes, I did. He is just a child. I could not let him die." Red Eagle studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come. We must get you warm before you freeze. You have proven yourself today, Michael Vance. You have proven yourself beyond any doubt." The rest of that day was a blur for Michael. He remembered being taken to one of the lodges, having his wet clothes stripped off and being wrapped in furs, being given hot broth to drink. He remembered Raven being there, her face tight with worry, helping to warm his hands and feet. He remembered drifting in and out of consciousness as his body recovered from the shock of the freezing water. When he finally fully woke, it was night, and he was lying in a lodge he did not recognize. A fire burned nearby, and he was buried under several layers of furs and blankets. His body ached, but he was warm and alive. "You are awake." Michael turned his head to see Raven sitting beside him. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, and he realized she must have been watching over him. "How long?" he managed to croak out, his throat dry. "It has been almost a full day," Raven told him, moving closer. "You scared us, Michael. You scared me. When I saw you go through the ice after Little Hawk, I thought my heart would stop." "The boy?" Michael asked urgently. "Is he all right?" "He is fine," Raven assured him. "Thanks to you. His mother has not stopped crying with gratitude. She wants to thank you herself when you are recovered." Michael closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over him. "Good, that is good." "Why did you do it?" Raven asked softly. "You could have died. You could have fallen through the ice yourself. Why did you risk so much for a child you barely know?" Michael opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the emotion swirling in those dark depths. "Because every life is precious," he said. "Because that little boy deserves the chance to grow up to have a future. And because," he paused, gathering his courage, "because I am starting to care very deeply about your people, about their struggles and their joys, about their children and their elders, about you." Raven drew in a sharp breath, and tears suddenly filled her eyes. "Michael," she whispered. "I know the timing is terrible," he continued, needing to get the words out now that he had started. "I know we barely know each other, that we come from different worlds, but I cannot deny what I feel anymore, Raven. Since the night I found you, you have been in my thoughts constantly. Your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. I have never met anyone like you, and I do not think I ever will again." A tear rolled down Raven's cheek, and she reached out to touch his face gently. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I have tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it is just gratitude for saving my life. But it is more than that, so much more. You have shown such respect for my people, such willingness to learn and understand. You risked your life for a child who is not your own. How can I not care for you? How can I not?" She paused, her voice breaking. "How can I not love you?" The word hung in the air between them, powerful and undeniable. Michael reached up with a shaking hand and cupped her cheek, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I love you too," he said, the words feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. "I think I have loved you from the moment I saw you, even if I did not know it then." Raven leaned down and pressed her forehead against his, and they stayed like that for a long moment, simply breathing each other in. Then, gently, carefully, she kissed him. It was a soft kiss, tender and sweet, but it sent fire racing through Michael's veins, warming him more effectively than all the blankets and furs combined. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. But reality intruded quickly. Raven sat back, worry creasing her brow. "My uncle," she said. "My people. This will not be easy, Michael. There will be those who oppose us, who think a Shoshone woman should not be with a white man." "I know," Michael said. "But I am not going anywhere, Raven. I accepted your uncle's challenge, and I intend to see it through to the end. And after that, if he will allow it, I want to stay. I want to be part of this community to help however I can, and I want to be with you if you will have me." Fresh tears spilled down Raven's cheeks, but she was smiling now. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Michael, I will have you, always." They talked through the rest of the night, sharing their hopes and dreams, their fears and worries. They spoke of practical matters, of what a life together might look like, of the challenges they would face. But they also spoke of love and commitment, of a future they both desperately wanted to build together. By the time dawn broke, Michael was feeling much stronger, and they emerged from the lodge to find the camp stirring to life around them. Red Eagle was standing nearby, and from the knowing look in his eyes, Michael suspected he had been aware of what was happening between his niece and the white cowboy for some time. "Michael Vance," the chief said formally, "I would speak with you." Michael's heart raced, but he nodded. "Of course, Chief." They walked to the edge of the camp, away from prying ears. Red Eagle was silent for a long time, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and thoughtful. "My niece is very precious to me," he said. "After her father died, I swore to protect her, to ensure her happiness and safety. I have watched you these past weeks, Michael Vance. I have seen how you work, how you learn, how you treat my people with genuine respect. I saw you risk your life to save Little Hawk without a moment's hesitation. And I have seen the way you look at Raven and the way she looks at you." Michael waited, his heart in his throat. Red Eagle turned to face him fully. "I do not give my blessing lightly," the chief continued. "The history between our peoples is filled with blood and betrayal. I have seen what happens when white men make promises to Indian women, only to abandon them when things become difficult. But I do not believe you are that kind of man. You have proven yourself worthy of respect, and more importantly, you have proven yourself worthy of my niece's love." Relief flooded through Michael, but Red Eagle held up a hand, signaling he was not finished. "However," the chief said sternly, "if you wish to be with Raven, you must understand what that means. You will be choosing a hard path. There will be those in both our worlds who will condemn you, who will see your love as a betrayal. You will face hardship and prejudice. Can you accept this?" "I can," Michael said firmly. "I will stand by Raven no matter what comes. I will protect her with my life, honor her with my actions, and love her with everything I have. This I swear to you, Chief Red Eagle." Red Eagle studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Then you have my blessing. But know this, Michael Vance. If you ever harm her, if you ever give me cause to regret this decision, there will be nowhere in this world you can hide from me." "I understand," Michael said. "And I promise you, you will never have cause to regret it." Red Eagle's stern expression softened slightly, and he placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Welcome to our family, then. May the Great Spirit guide your path and bless your union." The news of Red Eagle's blessing spread quickly through the camp, and reactions were mixed. Some people were happy for Raven, seeing in Michael a good man who genuinely cared for her. Others were more skeptical, reserving judgment until more time had passed. But most people seemed willing to give them a chance, influenced heavily by Michael's actions in saving Little Hawk and his consistent respect for Shoshone customs. The remainder of the month passed quickly. The camp found a new location, deep in the mountains where they hoped the soldiers would not find them, at least for a while. Michael continued his work, but now he did so as Raven's acknowledged suitor, and their relationship deepened with each passing day. They spent every moment they could together, learning each other's languages, sharing stories of their childhoods, dreaming about their future. Raven taught Michael more about Shoshone traditions and beliefs, and he shared with her his knowledge of ranching and farming, talking about his dream of one day having a place where Shoshone people could live safely, growing crops and raising cattle without fear of being forced away. When the month was finally up, Red Eagle called a council meeting. The entire camp gathered, forming a large circle around the fire. Michael stood in the center with Raven by his side, and Red Eagle addressed the assembled people. He spoke in Shoshone, his words carrying weight and authority. Though Michael could not understand every word, he caught enough to know that the chief was recounting everything that had happened over the past month. From the night Michael saved Raven to his rescue of Little Hawk. When Red Eagle finished speaking, he asked a question of the people, and one by one they responded. Finally, Red Eagle turned to Michael and switched to English. "The people have spoken," he said. "You have completed your challenge with honor and courage. You have shown respect for our ways and genuine care for our welfare. You are now considered a friend and brother to the Shoshone people. You may stay among us for as long as you wish, and you have my permission to marry my niece, if that is still your desire." Michael felt tears prick his eyes, overwhelmed by the acceptance and welcome he heard in the chief's words. He looked at Raven, who was openly crying now, her face radiant with joy. "It is my greatest desire," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want nothing more than to spend my life with Raven, to be part of this community, to help in whatever way I can." Red Eagle nodded solemnly. "Then it shall be so. We will hold the marriage ceremony when the full moon rises in 3 days' time. May your union be blessed, and your love endure through all the seasons of your life." The crowd erupted in cheers and celebration, and Michael found himself surrounded by people congratulating him, clapping him on the back, welcoming him into the tribe. Strong Bear approached with a rare smile on his face. "You did well, white man," he said. "I did not think you would make it past the first week, but you proved me wrong. I am glad to call you brother." "Thank you, Strong Bear," Michael said, gripping the other man's arm in the traditional gesture of friendship. "I could not have done it without your guidance and patience." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparation. A special lodge was erected for the ceremony, decorated with intricate designs and symbols. Raven worked with the other women to create a beautiful dress adorned with beadwork and quillwork, while Michael received instruction from the elders on the significance and meaning of the marriage ceremony. On the night of the full moon, as the silver light bathed the camp in an ethereal glow, the ceremony began. It was unlike any wedding Michael had ever witnessed. There were prayers and songs, offerings made to the spirits, symbolic gifts exchanged between families. Red Eagle and White Dove stood as Raven's representatives, while Strong Bear and Morning Song stood for Michael, having agreed to act as his family in the absence of his blood relatives. When the time came for vows, Michael and Raven stood facing each other in front of the entire community. An elder, A woman named Singing Wind, who was said to be over 90 years old, presided over the ceremony. She spoke in Shoshone, her voice surprisingly strong for her age, and Red Eagle translated for Michael. "The path of two becoming one is sacred," Singing Wind said. "It is a journey that will have both joy and sorrow, ease and hardship. Do you, Raven James, daughter of the Shoshone, promise to walk this path with Michael Vance, to honor him and stand by his side through all that life brings?" "I do," Raven said clearly, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. "I promise to love him and honor him all the days of my life." Singing Wind turned to Michael. "And do you, Michael Vance, promise to walk this path with Raven James, to honor her and stand by her side through all that life brings? Do you promise to respect the ways of her people and to protect her with all that you are?" "I do," Michael said, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to love her and honor her all the days of my life, to respect her people and defend them as my own." Singing Wind smiled, her weathered face creasing with pleasure. She took a long strip of soft leather and wrapped it around Michael and Raven's joined hands, binding them together. "What has been joined here tonight cannot be broken," she proclaimed. "You are now husband and wife, bound together by love and choice, blessed by the spirits and witnessed by your people. May your union bring children and prosperity. May your love be a light in the darkness, and may you walk together in harmony until the end of your days." The camp erupted in celebration, with drums beating and people singing and dancing. Michael and Raven were swept up in the festivities, pulled into the circle to dance together under the full moon. As Michael held his new wife in his arms, moving to the rhythm of the drums, he felt a profound sense of rightness, of having finally found where he belonged. The celebration lasted far into the night, and when it finally wound down, Michael and Raven retreated to their own lodge, which had been set up on the edge of the camp. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, with soft furs spread on the ground and a small fire burning. For the first time, they were truly alone as husband and wife. Michael pulled Raven close, cupping her face in his hands and kissing her deeply. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and they stood like that for a long moment, simply reveling in the joy of being together. "I love you," Michael whispered against her lips. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Raven replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You have given me so much, Michael, not just your love, but hope for a future I never thought possible." They made love slowly, tenderly, discovering each other with wonder and reverence. It was Michael's first time, and though he was nervous, Raven guided him with patience and love, showing him how to please her, how to move together as one. When they finally came together fully, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like they had been made for each other. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly as the fire burned low. They spoke of their dreams for the future, of the children they hoped to have, of the life they would build together. Despite all the uncertainty surrounding them, despite the knowledge that difficult times lay ahead, they both felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. Winter gradually gave way to spring, and life in the camp took on a new rhythm. Michael continued to learn and adapt to Shoshone ways, becoming more skilled in hunting and tracking, in working with leather and wood, in all the crafts necessary for survival. He also began to contribute his own knowledge, teaching some of the men about ranching techniques and crop cultivation, sharing ideas about how they might be able to become more self-sufficient. Raven bloomed beside him, her happiness evident to everyone in the camp. She taught Michael her language more formally now, and his fluency improved rapidly. They were rarely apart, working together during the day and falling asleep in each other's arms each night. About 3 months after their marriage, Raven began to suspect she was pregnant. She waited another month to be sure before telling Michael, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she finally shared the news with him one evening as they sat outside their lodge watching the sunset, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. A baby. He breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "We are going to have a baby," Raven nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, I think I am about 3 months along. The baby should come in the late fall when the leaves are turning." Michael let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. When he finally set her down, he was grinning so widely his face hurt. "I am going to be a father," he said in amazement. "I never thought I would have this, Raven. A wife I love, a family, a community. I never thought I deserved to be this happy." "You deserve all of this and more," Raven told him firmly, taking his face in her hands. "You are a good man, Michael Vance. The best man I have ever known. Our child is blessed to have you as a father." They shared the news with Red Eagle and White Dove that evening, and both were overjoyed. White Dove immediately began preparing special teas and herbs to help Raven through her pregnancy, while Red Eagle spoke quietly with Michael about the responsibilities of fatherhood, offering wisdom and guidance. As spring turned to summer, the camp moved to higher ground, following the seasonal patterns that the Shoshone had maintained for generations. Life was good, better than Michael had ever dared to hope, but trouble was never far away. In July, scouts reported that soldiers were once again in the area, searching for Shoshone bands to force onto reservations. Red Eagle called a council meeting to discuss their options. The situation was becoming increasingly dire. The government was putting more and more pressure on the tribes, and the areas where they could live freely were shrinking rapidly. Michael listened to the discussion, his heart heavy. He had witnessed firsthand the injustice being inflicted on the Shoshone people, the way they were being pushed from their ancestral lands, treated as criminals for simply trying to live according to their traditions. It filled him with anger and frustration, but he felt powerless to help. That night, as he lay beside Raven, feeling their baby move inside her belly for the first time, an idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, possibly even foolish, but it might offer a solution, or at least a temporary respite. "Raven," he said softly, "what if there was a place where your people could live safely? Where they would not have to keep running, where the children could grow up without fear?" Raven turned to look at him in the dim light. "Such a place does not exist, my husband. The white man's hunger for land is endless." "But what if we created one?" Michael persisted. "I have some money saved, not a lot, but enough to make a down payment on land. What if I bought property, established a ranch, and invited your people to live there? It would be legal, protected by white man's law. The soldiers could not force you out." Raven sat up, her eyes wide. "You would do that? Spend everything you have to help my people?" "They are our people now," Michael corrected gently. "And yes, I would. I will. It might take time, and we would have to be careful about how we do it, but I think it could work. We could create a place where Shoshone and white people live together, where we prove that coexistence is possible." Raven was quiet for a long moment, and Michael could practically see her mind working through the possibilities and problems. Finally, she spoke. "You should present this idea to my uncle," she said. "He will see the wisdom in it, I think, though he will also see the dangers. But it is worth trying, Michael. For our child, for all the children of our people, it is worth trying." The next morning, Michael requested a private meeting with Red Eagle. The chief listened carefully as Michael laid out his plan, asking pointed questions and raising valid concerns. When Michael finished speaking, Red Eagle was silent for a long time, his expression thoughtful. This would be a great sacrifice for you, Red Eagle said finally. To spend your savings to take on such responsibility. Why would you do this? Because I love your niece, Michael said simply. Because I want our child to grow up in a world where they do not have to choose between their Shoshone heritage and their white blood. Because I have come to care deeply for all of you, and I cannot stand by and watch while your people are destroyed. And because, he paused, searching for the right words, because it is the right thing to do. Someone has to take a stand, has to try to bridge the gap between our peoples. Why should it not be me? Red Eagle studied him for a long moment, and Michael met his gaze steadily. Finally, the chief nodded slowly. You have grown much since that first night, he said. You came to us as a stranger and outsider, but you have proven yourself to be a man of honor and courage, a true brother to our people. If you believe this plan can work, then I will support you. We will move carefully with wisdom and patience. But yes, let us try to create this safe place you speak of. The months that followed were incredibly busy. Michael made a trip to Malad City, accompanied by Strong Bear and 2 other warriors, to investigate land for sale. They found a promising piece of property about 30 miles north of the town, near the border with Wyoming. It was remote enough to offer privacy, but close enough to civilization to access supplies when needed. The land was beautiful, with a river running through it, good grazing for cattle and timber for building. Most importantly, the current owner was willing to sell for a reasonable price, motivated by age and a desire to return to family back east. Michael negotiated the purchase carefully, making it clear that he intended to establish a working ranch and would be employing both white and Indian workers. The owner, an old rancher named Samuel Harris, was surprisingly open to the idea. I have lived out here for 30 years, Harris told Michael. I have seen good people on both sides of this conflict, and I have seen terrible people too. If you think you can make a go of it, bringing folks together instead of pushing them apart, then more power to you, son. This land has seen enough blood and suffering. Maybe it is time for something better. Michael returned to the camp with news of the purchase, and there was cautious celebration. Not everyone was convinced the plan would work, but Red Eagle's support carried significant weight, and most people were willing to give it a chance. As summer turned to fall, a small group made the journey to the new property to begin establishing the ranch. Michael led the way, with Raven beside him despite being heavily pregnant. Red Eagle and White Dove came as well, along with Strong Bear's family, several other families, and some of the younger warriors. They arrived in late September and immediately set to work building structures and preparing for winter. It was hard, exhausting labor, but everyone pitched in. Michael worked alongside the Shoshone men, felling trees and constructing cabins, while the women began planting late-season crops and preserving food for the cold months ahead. Raven, despite her pregnancy, worked tirelessly as well, refusing to be treated as fragile. But on a cool October morning, as the leaves were turning brilliant shades of gold and red, her labor began. Michael was out working on one of the cabins when Strong Bear came running to get him. "The baby is coming," he said urgently. "Raven is asking for you." Michael dropped his tools and ran back to the main lodge where they had been staying. Inside, Raven was surrounded by women, including her mother and Morning Song. She was breathing hard, her face tense with pain, but when she saw Michael, she reached out for him. "I am here," he said, taking her hand and kneeling beside her. "I am right here, my love." White Dove spoke firmly to Michael in Shoshone, and Raven translated between contractions. "Mother says you should wait outside. This is women's work." But Michael shook his head, squeezing Raven's hand gently. "I am not leaving you. I want to be here when our child is born." White Dove looked disapproving, but Raven spoke to her mother in Shoshone, her voice firm despite the pain. After a moment, White Dove nodded reluctantly and gestured for Michael to move to Raven's side. The labor lasted through most of the day and into the evening. Michael stayed by Raven's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool water, murmuring words of encouragement and love. He had never felt so helpless in his life, watching her in pain and being unable to do anything to ease it. But Raven was strong, stronger than he had ever imagined. She bore the pain with remarkable courage, and when the midwife finally announced that it was time to push, she gathered her strength and gave it everything she had. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink when their son finally entered the world. His first cry was loud and healthy, and Michael felt tears streaming down his face as White Dove placed the baby in Raven's arms. "A boy," Raven said, her voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. "We have a son, Michael." Michael leaned in, looking down at the tiny, perfect face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were scrunched closed as he wailed his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world. He was the most beautiful thing Michael had ever seen. "Hello, little one," Michael whispered, reaching out to gently touch his son's tiny hand. "Welcome to the world. We have been waiting for you." The baby's fingers instinctively wrapped around Michael's larger finger, and Michael felt his heart expand with a love so fierce and protective it almost hurt. This was his son, his and Raven's. A perfect blend of both their worlds, born into a life that would not be easy but would be filled with love. They named him Marcus, which was Michael's father's name, with the middle name of 2 rivers, honoring his Shoshone heritage. Red Eagle blessed the baby in a traditional ceremony, and a celebration was held despite their still settling into the new place. The winter that followed was challenging but manageable. The structures they had built held strong against the cold and snow, and the food stores proved adequate. More families arrived from the main camp as word spread about the success of the settlement, and the community grew. Michael divided his time between working on the ranch, caring for his new son, and beginning to establish relationships with the white settlers in the area. It was a delicate balance, and there were definitely people who opposed what he was doing. He faced hostility and prejudice from some quarters, with certain townspeople making it clear they did not approve of him living with and employing Indians. But there were also allies. Samuel Harris, the man who had sold them the land, proved to be a good friend, speaking up in support of the ranch when others criticized it. A few other ranchers, seeing the quality of work being done and impressed by Michael's dedication, began to cautiously accept the unusual arrangement. The biggest challenge came in the spring of 1879, when a local official tried to have the Shoshone residents forcibly removed, claiming they were in violation of government policy. Michael fought back, hiring a lawyer from Boise and arguing that the Shoshone people were not living on tribal land but were employed workers on private property, legally present under his sponsorship. It was a tense few weeks, but ultimately Michael's argument prevailed. The ruling set a precedent that would prove important for other mixed communities in the region, though it did nothing to ease the underlying tensions. Through all of this, Michael's relationship with Raven only deepened. They faced each challenge together, supporting each other through the difficult times and celebrating the victories. Little Marcus grew quickly, a healthy, happy baby who was doted on by the entire community. On Marcus's first birthday, the ranch held a large celebration that brought together both the Shoshone residents and friendly white neighbors. It was a powerful symbol of what Michael and Raven were trying to build, a place where different cultures could coexist and even thrive together. As Michael stood watching the festivities with Marcus balanced on his hip and Raven by his side, Red Eagle approached. The chief looked satisfied, a rare expression of contentment on his usually serious face. "You have done something remarkable here, Michael Vance," Red Eagle said. "When you first came to us, I did not know if I could trust you, but you have proven yourself beyond any doubt. You have given my people hope and safety, a chance at a future we thought was lost. For that, I will be forever grateful." Michael felt emotion tighten his throat. "I only did what anyone with a conscience should do, and none of it would have been possible without your support and the hard work of your people, our people." Red Eagle smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. "You are truly one of us now in every way that matters. Your son will grow up knowing both worlds, strong in both traditions. That is a great gift you have given him." As if understanding he was being discussed, Marcus babbled happily and reached for his grandfather, and Red Eagle took him with the practiced ease of a man who had held many babies. Watching them together, Michael felt a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch faced droughts and harsh winters, conflicts with hostile neighbors, and the ever-present pressure of government policies that sought to limit Native American freedoms. But through it all, the community held strong, growing and adapting. Michael and Raven had 3 more children over the years, 2 daughters they named Rose and Rebecca, and another son, Martin. Each child was raised to honor both their Shoshone and white heritage, fluent in both languages and comfortable in both worlds. The ranch became known throughout the region as a successful example of cooperation between cultures. Young people from both backgrounds came to work there, learning from each other and forming friendships that crossed traditional boundaries. It was not paradise. There were still prejudices to overcome and difficulties to navigate, but it was progress. Real and meaningful. Strong Bear and Morning Song remained close friends, with their children growing up alongside Michael and Raven's children. White Dove lived to see all her grandchildren born and thriving, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, surrounded by family. Red Eagle remained a pillar of strength and wisdom for the community until his death in 1895 at the age of 84. Before he died, he told Michael that finding him that winter night, or rather, having Michael find Raven, had been the best thing that ever happened to their people. He said it had restored his faith that there were good people in the world, people willing to do what was right regardless of the cost. Michael continued to run the ranch well into his later years, with Marcus eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations. The younger Vance proved to have inherited his father's work ethic and his mother's wisdom, and under his leadership, the ranch continued to prosper. On a warm summer evening in 1910, Michael and Raven sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. They were both in their 50s now, their hair showing gray, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. But their love had not diminished with time. If anything, it had grown stronger and deeper. "You ever regret it?" Raven asked softly, taking Michael's hand in hers. "Choosing this life. You could have had things so much easier if you had just ridden away that night, left me to my fate." Michael turned to look at her, this woman who had been his partner, his love, his best friend for over 30 years. He thought about everything they had been through together, all the challenges they had faced and overcome, all the joy and love they had shared. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Finding you that night was the best thing that ever happened to me, Raven. You gave my life meaning and purpose. Everything we have built here, our children, our community, our legacy, it all started because I heard you crying in the darkness." How could I ever regret that? Tears shimmered in Raven's eyes, but she was smiling. I love you, Michael Vance. I have loved you from that first night, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Michael replied, leaning in to kiss her gently. "Always and forever, my beautiful Raven." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in harmony. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their family, their grandchildren playing and laughing, the community they had built thriving around them. Michael thought back to that cold winter night in 1878, when he had been just a lonely cowboy trying to escape the storm. He had no idea then that he was about to meet the woman who would change his life forever, who would teach him about love and courage and the true meaning of family. The fire he had shared that night had been a small thing, just warmth against the cold, safety against the darkness. But it had sparked something far greater, a love that would burn bright for the rest of their lives, lighting the way not just for them but for generations to come. Years continued to pass, and Michael and Raven grew old together, surrounded by the love of their children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch they had established became a lasting legacy, a testament to what could be achieved when people chose love over hate, understanding over prejudice, cooperation over conflict. When Michael passed away peacefully in 1922, at the age of 69, with Raven holding his hand and their entire family gathered around, his last words were of gratitude. Gratitude for the life he had been given, for the woman who had been his partner through it all, for the family they had created together. Raven lived for 3 more years after Michael's death, though everyone said a part of her went with him. She spent her final years sharing stories with her grandchildren, ensuring they knew the full history of how their family came to be, of the courage and love that had founded their community. She told them about a cold winter night in 1878, about a cowboy who could have ridden past, but chose instead to stop and help, about a fire shared that kindled a love so strong it changed the world around them. She told them about Red Eagle's challenge, about building a life together against all odds, about the power of choosing love even when it seemed impossible. When Raven passed peacefully in 1925, she was laid to rest beside Michael on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their graves became a place of pilgrimage for their descendants, a reminder of where they came from and the values they were meant to uphold. The community they had established continued to thrive for generations, adapting and evolving with the times, but never losing sight of its founding principles. The Vance Ranch became known throughout Idaho and beyond as a place where different cultures came together, where prejudice was challenged, and where love proved stronger than hate. Marcus, their eldest son, told his own children and grandchildren about his parents' love story, about how a simple act of kindness on a frozen night had led to something extraordinary. He spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, of the courage it took to love across cultural divides, of the legacy of acceptance and understanding they had left behind. The story of Michael Vance and Raven James became legend in the region, passed down through the generations as an example of what could be achieved when people chose to see each other's humanity rather than their differences. Schools taught about them, historians wrote about them, and families from all backgrounds claimed them as inspiration. But perhaps the greatest testament to their love was not in the history books or the stories, but in the living, breathing legacy of their descendants. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried both Shoshone and white heritage with pride, who refused to be limited by the prejudices of the past, who built lives based on the principles of respect, understanding, and love that Michael and Raven had exemplified. The ranch itself continued to operate well into the 21st century, though it evolved with the times. The original cabins Michael and the first settlers had built were preserved as historical sites, and the land was expanded and modernized. But at its heart, it remained true to the vision its founders had held, a place where different peoples could come together in mutual respect and cooperation. On the spot where Michael had first shared his fire with Raven, a monument was eventually erected, a simple stone marker with words carved into it. Love knows no boundaries. Here, in the winter of 1878, two souls from different worlds found each other and chose love over fear, unity over division. May their example light the way for all who come after. Every year, on the anniversary of that fateful night, descendants of both Michael and Raven, as well as members of the broader community, gathered at that spot to share a fire, just as their ancestors had done. It became a tradition, a way of honoring the past while looking toward the future, a reminder that the most powerful force in the world is love freely given and gratefully received. The story of the cowboy who shared his fire with a freezing tribal woman, and the chief who arrived at sunrise with a challenge, became more than just history. It became a living testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the possibility of building bridges even in the most divided of times. Michael and Raven's love story proved that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest acts of kindness, that the greatest legacies are built not on grand gestures but on daily choices to do what is right and good. Their story showed that love could indeed conquer all, that it could cross cultural divides, overcome prejudice, and create something beautiful and lasting. And so their story lived on, not just in memory but in action, in the lives of every person who chose love over hate, understanding over prejudice, cooperation over conflict. Every act of kindness, every bridge built between different peoples, every choice to see the humanity in another person, carried forward the legacy that began on that cold winter night in 1878. The fire Michael shared with Raven had long since turned to ash, but the warmth it generated continued to burn bright, passed from generation to generation, a flame that would never be extinguished as long as there were people willing to choose love, to take risks for what they believed in, and to build a better world for those who would come after. In the end, their story was not just about a cowboy and a tribal woman who fell in love. It was about the power of human connection, about the courage it takes to stand up for what is right, about the possibility of creating something better when people refuse to accept the limitations imposed by society. It was about hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love to transform not just individual lives but entire communities. Michael Vance and Raven James had lived and loved fully, faced their challenges with courage, raised their family with wisdom, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story was complete, a tale of love triumphant, of bridges built, of a future created through choice and commitment. And in that completion, there was profound beauty, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they chose each other and refused to let anything tear them apart.